I wouldn't change one thing. Not one thing.
Dean Martin seemed to have everything a man could ever want. He had fame that stretched across generations, a fortune beyond imagination, and millions of devoted fans who adored every smile, every joke, and every song he performed. To the public, he was the definition of effortless cool. Whether he was crooning timeless ballads, making audiences laugh, or strolling onto a Hollywood set with a drink in his hand, Dean appeared completely at ease. Nothing ever seemed to shake him. He made success look easy. But that polished image hid a heartbreaking reality. Behind the relaxed grin and the trademark glass of whiskey was a man carrying wounds that grew heavier with every passing year.
Debonair Dean Martin died today at his home in Beverly Hills, California.
Long after the cameras stopped rolling and the applause faded, Dean Martin spent his final years quietly falling apart. The confidence that had once defined him slowly gave way to grief, loneliness, and painful memories he could never escape. The man who had entertained millions eventually became a shadow of the star the world believed it knew. Few people witnessed that painful transformation more closely than Jeanne Martin. Jeanne had been Dean's wife for 24 years. Together they built a family, shared incredible highs, endured public scrutiny, and lived through the extraordinary world of Hollywood. Even after their marriage ended in divorce, one thing never changed. She never stopped caring about him. While millions continued seeing Dean Martin as an untouchable icon, Jeanne saw the man behind the legend. She watched the loneliness grow deeper. She saw the regrets he rarely spoke about. Most of all, she witnessed the devastating personal loss that slowly consumed him, a tragedy so profound that neither money, fame, nor lifelong friendships could heal it. Their story began with glamour, romance, and seemingly endless success. It ended with heartbreak, loyalty, and a slow goodbye that no Hollywood screenwriter could have imagined.
I love to sing and I love women.
This is the tragic final chapter of Dean Martin and the woman who stood by as she watched the man she once loved slowly disappear. Long before he became one of the biggest entertainers in America, Dean Martin's story started in a very different place. There were no bright lights or luxurious mansions in the beginning, no red carpets, no sold-out theaters, just the gray industrial streets of Steubenville, Ohio, a hard-working steel town sitting along the banks of the Ohio River. There, on June 7, 1917, Dino Paul Crocetti entered the world.
Martin's comedy act with Jerry Lewis made him a household name. But it was Martin's post-Lewis career that made him a star.
He was the son of two Italian immigrants who had crossed the Atlantic in search of a better future. His father, Gaetano Crocetti, arrived from Abruzzo, Italy in 1913 and eventually opened a modest neighborhood barbershop. His mother, Angela, was a first-generation Italian-American whose greatest joy was filling their home with music. Italian folk songs drifted through the house almost every day, mixing with laughter, large family meals, and conversations spoken almost entirely in Italian. The Crocetti family had plenty of love, but very little money. Because English was rarely spoken at home, young Dino faced an immediate struggle when he entered school. He could barely understand his teachers, and his thick Italian accent quickly made him an easy target. Classmates mocked the way he spoke, laughed at his pronunciation, and constantly reminded him that he didn't fit in. Years later, Dean would joke that he left school because he was simply too smart for it. It was a classic Dean Martin line, delivered with perfect timing and a smile. The truth, however, was much sadder. School had become a lonely place where embarrassment outweighed opportunity.
Well, I drink, but I'm not a boozer, not an alcoholic or anything like that.
By the time he reached the 10th grade, Dino walked away for good, convinced that life outside the classroom would teach him far more than anything written on a blackboard. Those lessons came quickly, and they were anything but easy. Like countless young men trying to survive during difficult times, Dino accepted almost any job he could find. He worked grueling shifts in a steel mill, pumped gas at service stations, delivered milk before sunrise, and even transported illegal liquor during the final years of Prohibition. Every job paid a little, but none offered much hope for the future. Searching for another way to earn money, he stepped into the boxing ring. Fighting under the name Kid Crochet, Dino competed as a welterweight in 12 professional bouts. His record was far from impressive. He managed only a single victory while losing the rest. Looking back years later, he would laugh and tell audiences, "I won all but 11." The joke always earned a laugh. What audiences didn't see were the scars hidden behind the punchline. Boxing left him with a permanently crooked nose, split lips, battered hands, and countless painful memories. Those injuries would stay with him long after he stopped fighting. Ironically, one of those scars would eventually help define the image the world came to know. After Dean found success, comedian Lou Costello generously paid for surgery to repair his damaged nose. The operation helped complete the smooth, handsome appearance that would become one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces.
You open it, honey. I don't do sight fits.
Even then, success remained a distant dream. During those difficult years, Dino shared a cramped New York apartment with fellow entertainer Sonny King. They were young, ambitious, and almost constantly broke. When they ran out of money, they came up with an unusual way to earn a few dollars. They organized bare-knuckle boxing matches inside their tiny apartment, charging curious spectators $5 each to watch the fights unfold in their living room. It was an unconventional hustle, but it reflected the determination that would eventually carry Dino Paul Crocetti from poverty to worldwide fame. At the time, however, he was simply another struggling young man trying to survive one day at a time, with no way of knowing that the name Dean Martin would soon become one of the most celebrated in entertainment history. On the better nights, Dino and Sonny managed to earn around $50 from the crowds who gathered to watch their improvised boxing matches. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay the rent and buy another week of hope. On the bad nights, survival became far more creative. The two struggling entertainers would sit in busy diners, pretending to receive important phone calls before quietly slipping over to tables that had just been abandoned, stealing a few bites from unfinished meals before anyone noticed. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept them alive. Ironically, those difficult years became the foundation of the personality the world would one day fall in love with. Even when he had almost nothing, Dino possessed an effortless charm that made people enjoy being around him. He could make strangers laugh, put nervous people at ease, and somehow brighten even the bleakest room.
I'm not lazy. They want to think I'm lazy, but they know I work.
That natural charisma eventually opened a door that changed his life forever. While working as a croupier in an illegal gambling casino hidden behind a tobacco shop, Dino often sang quietly between card games to entertain customers waiting for the next hand. He wasn't performing for fame. He simply loved to sing. One evening, fate happened to be sitting in the audience. Band leader Ernie McKay overheard the young man's smooth, velvety voice and immediately recognized something special. After listening for only a short time, he approached Dino with an offer that would alter the course of his life. "Would you like to sing professionally?" Dino didn't hesitate. He accepted immediately. For the first time, music offered something none of his previous jobs ever had: the possibility of a future. Performing under the stage name Dino Martini, inspired by the famous Italian tenor Nino Martini, he began touring clubs throughout Ohio and Pennsylvania. Night after night, he slowly gained confidence in front of live audiences. The crowds weren't enormous, but they were growing. Then another mentor gave him advice that would prove just as important as discovering his voice. In 1940, Dino joined the band of Sammy Watkins. an experienced orchestra leader who believed the young singer had enormous potential. Watkins loved his voice, but thought his stage name needed work. He looked at the young performer and offered a simple piece of career advice.
I mean, could I be where I am today if I were lazy and if I were a boozer?
You've got the voice, kid, but if you want to go places, drop the I. Make it Dean Martin. It sounded like a minor adjustment. In reality, it changed everything. Dean Martin felt smooth, modern, distinctly American, and incredibly memorable. It rolled effortlessly off the tongue. More importantly, it fit the image of the sophisticated entertainer Dino was slowly becoming. From that moment forward, Dean Martin was born. Neither he nor anyone around him could have imagined that the new name would eventually become one of the biggest in entertainment history. Nor could they have known how much triumph, heartbreak, and personal tragedy it would eventually carry. As Dean's professional life finally began moving in the right direction, another important chapter was beginning. By the early 1940s, he had developed confidence as a performer, and opportunities were becoming more frequent. What he still lacked, however, was stability away from the stage. That changed in 1941 when he met Elizabeth Ann Betty McDonald. Betty was a warm-hearted young woman from Ohio who fell in love with Dean before the fame, before the television cameras, and before millions of fans knew his name. She didn't fall for a celebrity. She fell for a struggling singer with enormous dreams and very little money. The two married that same year. Life together was far from glamorous. Their early marriage was built on uncertainty. Dean spent countless evenings performing in smoky nightclubs, dance halls, and tiny lounges, often for little or no money at all. Every performance carried the same question: would this finally be the night someone important noticed him? Meanwhile, Betty became the steady foundation of their growing family. As Dean chased his dream, she stayed home caring for their children and keeping their household together through the constant financial uncertainty. Their family grew quickly. Their son Craig was born in 1941, followed by Claudia in 1944, Gail in 1945, and Dina in 1948. To audiences, Dean Martin was becoming the charming young singer whose smooth voice could melt hearts. Behind closed doors, however, he was simply a husband and father trying desperately to provide for 4 young children while chasing an unpredictable career. But success often brings temptations that ordinary life cannot prepare someone for. As Dean's popularity increased, so did the demands on his time. He traveled more frequently, spent longer nights away from home, and found himself surrounded by glamorous parties, influential executives, and beautiful women. At the same time, Betty was fighting battles of her own. She struggled with severe alcoholism, sometimes disappearing for days or even weeks at a time. The emotional distance between husband and wife continued to widen. Dean, increasingly immersed in Hollywood's nightlife, did little to repair the growing cracks in their marriage. Rumors of his affairs quietly circulated throughout entertainment circles. Most newspapers chose not to print them, helping preserve the carefully crafted public image of the smooth gentleman who always seemed relaxed, drink in hand, and smile on his face. But private appearances can hide public truths. Inside the Martin household, the damage had already become impossible to ignore. By 1949, the marriage was over. Dean filed for divorce and, in a decision that surprised many people at the time, was awarded custody of all 4 of their children. Betty quietly left the spotlight behind, relocating to San Francisco and living the remainder of her life far from Hollywood's attention. She passed away in 1989, decades after Dean had become one of the biggest stars in America, though she could never completely escape the shadow of the famous name they had once shared. Dean, however, wasted little time beginning another chapter. Only 1 week after the divorce became official, he married Jeanne, a beautiful model and former Orange Bowl queen. Their wedding took place on September 1st, 1949, and reflected Dean's rapidly growing celebrity status. It was a glamorous Hollywood event, made even more memorable by the presence of his comedy partner, Jerry Lewis, who proudly stood beside him as best man. Jeanne possessed an elegance and quiet loyalty that perfectly complemented Dean's larger-than-life career. For a time, it genuinely seemed as though he had finally found the balance he had always been searching for. She remained beside him during the years that transformed him into an international superstar. She watched his legendary comedy partnership with Jerry Lewis reach incredible heights. She witnessed his successful transition into a solo recording artist. She stood beside him as he became a central figure in the Rat Pack, sharing stages with some of the biggest names in entertainment. Together, Dean and Jeanne built another family, welcoming 3 children: Dean Paul in 1951, Ricci in 1953, and Gina in 1956. Jeanne Martin didn't simply become Dean Martin's wife. She became the heart of a blended family that few people could have managed. After marrying Dean, she embraced not only the 3 children they would have together, but also the 4 children from his first marriage to Betty. All 7 children were raised under the same roof, and Jeanne worked tirelessly to give them the stability that Dean's demanding career often made impossible. To the outside world, they looked like the perfect American family. Magazine covers showed smiling faces, elegant parties, and a glamorous Hollywood lifestyle. Dean's career continued soaring while Jeanne appeared to handle everything at home with grace and quiet strength. From a distance, it seemed they had built the life everyone dreamed about. But fame has a way of testing even the strongest marriages. As Dean became one of the biggest stars in America, his schedule grew relentless. Concerts, television appearances, films, and endless travel kept him away from home for longer stretches. Hollywood's nightlife surrounded him with temptation, and the rumors of infidelity became increasingly difficult to ignore. Jeanne forgave him again and again. She believed in the man behind the celebrity and hoped that one day the excitement surrounding his career would settle down. But year after year, the disappointments continued to pile up. Eventually, even her remarkable patience reached its limit. In 1973, after 24 years of marriage, Dean and Jeanne divorced. Although Dean would marry once more, those closest to him always believed that Jeanne had been the great love of his life. She understood him better than anyone else ever would. Friends later said that despite moving forward publicly, a part of Dean never truly recovered from losing the woman who had stood beside him through the most important years of his life. Professionally, however, the 1960s had turned him into something even bigger than a movie star. When Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis ended their legendary comedy partnership in 1956, many people believed Dean's career was finished. Critics dismissed him as the quiet half of the duo, insisting he lacked the energy and comedic brilliance to succeed alone. Dean never argued with them. Instead, he let his success answer every criticism. Within only a few years, he had completely reinvented himself. No longer viewed as someone's sidekick, Dean emerged as one of the coolest, most charismatic entertainers in America. His effortless style became his greatest strength. The transformation reached another level in Las Vegas. There, he joined forces with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. Together, they became the Rat Pack, a group of performers whose chemistry, humor, and larger-than-life personalities transformed the Las Vegas Strip into the entertainment capital of America. Night after night, audiences packed the Sands Hotel to watch them perform. The shows felt unpredictable. They joked with one another, teased audience members, sang legendary songs, and created the feeling that everyone watching had somehow been invited into a private party among friends. To millions of fans, they represented style, confidence, and effortless cool. Among them all, Dean appeared to be the wildest. He usually walked on stage with a cigarette dangling from one hand and a whiskey glass resting comfortably in the other. His tie looked slightly crooked. His jokes sounded spontaneous. His speech occasionally slurred just enough to suggest he had been drinking long before the curtain rose. It became one of the most famous images in entertainment history. The remarkable part was that it was mostly an illusion. More often than not, the whiskey glass contained nothing stronger than apple juice. The relaxed swagger, the slow speech, and the carefree, drunken persona were carefully crafted parts of his performance. Dean had perfected the role so convincingly that even Frank Sinatra once admitted audiences completely believed it. While everyone else appeared to be partying, Dean was frequently the only sober man on stage. Yet the success of that character came with an unexpected cost. Eventually, people stopped separating the performance from the performer. To the public, Dean Martin wasn't simply acting cool. He was cool. He became a symbol rather than a person, an image so polished that few people ever wondered what he was like once the spotlight disappeared. Behind the curtain, the reality was very different. Dean was naturally quiet and reserved. Unlike Sinatra, who often stayed out until sunrise, gambling, socializing, and celebrating, Dean usually left immediately after the show. He preferred returning home, watching television, and quietly falling asleep. Despite all the laughter he created, loneliness increasingly became part of his private life. At the same time, his acting career continued proving that critics had underestimated him. Powerful performances in films such as Rio Bravo and The Young Lions demonstrated emotional depth that audiences hadn't expected. Hollywood had spent years trying to define him as simply a nightclub singer or comic performer. Dean refused to stay inside that box. Then, in 1965, his career reached another extraordinary milestone. NBC launched The Dean Martin Show, hoping to capture the same effortless charm that audiences loved in Las Vegas. Before agreeing, however, Dean made demands that almost no television star would have dared to request. He wanted virtually no rehearsals. He wanted filming limited to a single day each week. And perhaps most remarkably, he wanted ownership rights after the show's initial broadcast. To almost everyone's surprise, NBC accepted his terms. The gamble paid off spectacularly. The series ran for 264 episodes and attracted more than 40 million viewers every week. Dean had built a television empire by simply being himself, or at least by making audiences believe they were watching the real Dean Martin. Every episode carried the same relaxed energy. He looked as though he had wandered onto the set without preparation, casually joking with guests and forgetting lyrics just enough to make everything feel genuine. That effortless style became his greatest trademark, but behind the enormous success, an uncomfortable truth continued growing. The richer he became, the more famous he became, the emptier life often felt. The applause ended. The television cameras shut off. Friends went home. Dean was left alone. He once remarked, "If you have luck, you don't have to be smart." But luck fades. As the 1970s came to an end, those words began sounding less like a joke and more like a quiet prediction of what was waiting ahead. Then tragedy struck with unimaginable force. On March 21st, 1987, Dean Martin experienced the worst day of his life. His beloved son, Dean Paul Martin, an actor, musician, and California Air National Guard pilot, was flying an F-4C Phantom fighter jet during a military training exercise when the aircraft crashed into a snow-covered mountain in California. He was only 35 years old. Dean Paul had always held a special place in his father's heart. Friends often described him as Dean's pride and joy, the son he affectionately called his golden boy. Their relationship required very few words because they understood each other instinctively. Dean had endured failed marriages, public scandals, career pressures, and decades of Hollywood fame. Nothing prepared him for burying his son. Rescue teams searched the mountains for 6 agonizing days before finally locating the wreckage. When the search ended, something inside Dean Martin seemed to disappear forever. Those closest to him later said they never truly saw the old Dean again. He smiled less. He performed less. He gradually stopped caring about the career that had once defined his life. His longtime friend and impressionist Rich Little later summarized the transformation with heartbreaking simplicity. Once he lost his son, that was the end of him. At the time of the tragedy, Dean had been preparing to reunite with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. for a major concert tour appropriately titled The Ultimate Event. It was promoted as a triumphant Rat Pack reunion and one of the biggest entertainment events of the decade. But after Dean Paul's death, the excitement no longer mattered. Dean forced himself to appear at the opening performances, yet audiences could immediately see something had changed. He stood on stage, physically present but emotionally somewhere else. The jokes came slower. The smile rarely reached his eyes. After only a handful of performances, he quietly walked away from the tour. Frank Sinatra tried everything he could think of to persuade his old friend to return. Dean simply couldn't do it. And in the middle of that unimaginable grief, one familiar person rushed back into his life. Jeanne, the woman he had divorced years earlier, immediately went to his side, determined to help the man she had never truly stopped loving. Although Dean and Jeanne had been divorced for more than a decade, the bond between them never truly disappeared. In many ways, their marriage had ended on paper, but not in their hearts. When Dean withdrew from the world after the death of their son, Jeanne instinctively returned to the role she had played for so many years. She became his quiet guardian. Among friends and family, it was often said that she was the only person who could still reach him. She never tried to force conversations or pressure him to move on. Instead, she simply stayed close. She frequently visited the same Beverly Hills restaurants where Dean ate dinner alone night after night, often sitting only a short distance away. She wasn't there to interrupt his solitude. She was there to make sure he wasn't completely alone. It was an extraordinary act of loyalty. Without asking for recognition or expecting anything in return, Jeanne watched over the man she had once called her husband, quietly standing beside him through the darkest chapter of his life. The tragedy of 1987 had taken far more than Dean Paul's life. It had taken Dean Martin's spirit. To the public, Dean was still remembered as the smooth entertainer who had made generations smile with songs like Everybody Loves Somebody. Television reruns continued to show the relaxed performer with the crooked grin, effortless charm, and perfectly timed jokes. But those closest to him saw something entirely different. They saw a father who had never recovered from unbearable loss. Friends recalled Dean occasionally saying, "I'm just waiting to die." People often assumed it was another one of his dry jokes. It wasn't. It was a heartbreaking confession from a man who felt that the most important part of his life had already ended. After 1987, Dean Martin slowly disappeared from public life. Television appearances became increasingly rare. Concert performances almost completely stopped. He turned down invitations from old friends and withdrew from the glamorous Hollywood social scene that had once revolved around him. Most evenings followed the same quiet routine. He would have dinner alone at familiar Beverly Hills restaurants before returning home, where old television shows played in the background while photographs of happier times surrounded him. Those pictures, especially the ones of Dean Paul, became painful reminders of a life that could never be restored. Meanwhile, Jeanne continued watching over him from a respectful distance. Neither of them needed many words anymore. Their shared grief said everything. By 1993, Dean's own health had begun to fail. After decades of heavy smoking, doctors diagnosed him with lung cancer. Specialists strongly recommended surgery, believing it offered his best chance of survival. Dean refused. When friends asked why, his answer was remarkably simple. "No," he quietly said, "I've had a good life." Those 6 words carried enormous weight. They reflected not only physical exhaustion, but emotional exhaustion as well. It was the response of a man who had achieved extraordinary success, experienced tremendous love, endured devastating loss, and no longer possessed the desire to keep fighting. His final months were marked by silence. The laughter that had once echoed through sold-out theaters was gone. The music became quieter. Visitors became fewer. Most days were spent surrounded by family photographs, television reruns, and memories that seemed to grow stronger as his body grew weaker. The man who had once filled Las Vegas showrooms with life now waited peacefully for the final curtain to fall. On Christmas Day, December 25, 1995, Dean Martin passed away at the age of 78. The official cause of death was acute respiratory failure resulting from emphysema. Hollywood mourned the loss of one of its true legends. Frank Sinatra, devastated by the news, described Dean not simply as a friend, but as a brother by choice rather than by blood. 3 days later, Las Vegas honored the man who had helped shape its golden era. For 10 unforgettable minutes, the lights along the famous strip dimmed in silence. Iconic landmarks such as the Sands, the Flamingo, and the Stardust went dark as thousands paused to remember the entertainer whose effortless style had helped define an entire generation of nightlife. It was a rare tribute reserved for only the greatest legends. Dean Martin was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles. His crypt bears a simple inscription taken from the song that became forever linked with his name. Everybody loves somebody sometime. It was a fitting farewell for the man whose voice had brought comfort and joy to millions around the world. Jeanne never remarried. She spent the years after Dean's death living quietly, surrounded by photographs of her children, her grandchildren, and the man she had never completely stopped loving. Even after everything they had experienced together, she remained connected to his memory until the very end. In 2016, Jeanne passed away from cancer at the age of 89. Only weeks earlier, tragedy had struck the family once again when their son Richie, who had dedicated much of his life to preserving his father's musical legacy, also passed away. Jeanne was laid to rest not far from Dean. In the end, the distance that life had placed between them disappeared once again. Looking back, it's easy to remember Dean Martin for the laughter, the music, the movies, and the effortless cool that made him one of Hollywood's greatest stars. But behind that legendary image was a man who spent his final years surrounded not by applause, but by silence, and by the quiet devotion of a woman who never stopped caring for him. Jeanne couldn't save him from the grief that began the day they lost their son. No one could. Their story began with hope, romance, and extraordinary success. It ended with heartbreak, unwavering loyalty, and a love that somehow endured long after the marriage itself was over. Hollywood remembered Dean Martin as an icon. Those who knew him remembered something else: a father, a husband, a friend, and a man whose greatest performance could never hide his deepest pain. What do you think? Do you believe Dean Martin ever found peace during his final years, or was he forever haunted by the loss of his son and the life he once had? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another untold story from Hollywood's golden age. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.